Hi, everyone. In this video, I'm going to discuss a few analytic models, as I've chosen to call them. And these are just frameworks that you can use to bring together the information that you gather about your company and the industry and other parts of the external environment that you find that company in. When you're doing analytic work and you want to try to summarize your findings as you look at economy, market, industry of your company and how the company fits into that environment. Very often these analytic models help you to bring the information together and communicate it more effectively than if you didn't have these models to use as tools. And in addition to those models, I'm also going to show you one model that helps to bring it all together in another way by selecting an approach for a company's strategy to reconcile this information by making some decisions about the direction the company can take after you've collected all that information. So with that, let me just get started and we'll see what we can do. Now, sometimes I have difficulty getting these things to come up on the screen. But I got lucky. Here we go. Okay, so these are the models that we're going to look at, and they sort of flow together. The industry life cycle, you might imagine, is the history that an industry or a company goes through. Based on that life cycle, we make some decisions about the direction that we would like to take with regard to putting together a portfolio of businesses that take advantage of various stages of the life cycle. Porter's National Diamond tells us how to assess the economic forces that either make an industry able to flourish and grow or otherwise. Porter's 5 Forces is a model that helps us estimate the profit potential of companies in an industry. The Cage model and the Frostide's culture model give us some information to do a better job with Porter's 5 Forces. The Ansoff growth strategy matrix is just what it sounds. It helps us make some decisions about the direction that a business will take. And finally, we'll take a little look at the issues that can arise when we're doing business internationally and are concerned about the potential risk that we find in an industry. So with that, let's just get started with the industry life cycle. Most of you have already seen these models, and at least I imagine that you have. But industries and companies, to a very similar extent, go through various life cycle stages. In the embryonic stage, companies are sort of jockeying. Well, there may be only one company that is trying to get its product established as the standard for the industry that will be accepted or adopted by its intended users or consumers, its customers. Eventually, if some acceptance is found for this new product or this new concept, other firms will attempt to emulate what that company did and enter the fledgling industry. And so then we have a growth industry. And if more companies come in and if they also meet with success, the industry can grow. There will come a time when the industry doesn't grow as fast because the saturation limit is approached. It's not necessarily reached at the shakeout stage, but things are getting a lot tougher. And it's at that point that the Darwin's little game is played, and the fittest to survive do survive, and firms that are weaker or not sufficiently structured to meet the requirements of the market will be eliminated. Perhaps they'll be acquired or just drop out. Eventually, the industry will reach its maximum growth, and the market will be saturated. The industry then will grow as the market grows, but no further. Eventually, technology may do what it does to lots of industries and either reduce them or remove them. So at one time, we had black and white television, then we had color television. At one time, we had a landline telephone, then we had cell phones, then we had cell phones with computers in them, and well, I guess the first stage was to put a camera in them and then computers in them and so forth. But industries do evolve, and with technology or market shifts, they may decline and even go away. Other industries don't decline, they just remain at maturity. An example would be laundry detergent or soap, something like that, clothing. So many industries, when they reach maturity, they just stay there. Okay, so now what you would like to do in your work is determine what stage the company that you're, I'm trying to adjust my chair, sorry. But what stage of development is, or maturity, is your industry in, and what stage is the company that you are studying in? And bear in mind that your answers will differ depending upon the country. Some industries are just getting started in some countries, but they're mature in other countries. By the same token, you may find that companies have more than one business. And if they have more than one business, then this analysis can and should be done for the major lines of business. So in the case of John Deere, the machinery maker, it makes agricultural machinery for customers all over the world, but it also makes construction machinery, and it makes forestry machinery. And as many of you probably know, it makes ride-on lawnmowers and larger lawn maintenance equipment for golf courses. So Deere has a variety of markets and makes a variety of products for those different markets. And depending on where in the world they are at various life cycle stages. So this simple little model suddenly became kind of complicated, didn't it? Nevertheless, it's very useful because we can then move into understanding just where we are with our portfolio of products and how we might want to change it. So if I just ask you to take a quick look at these various types or labels of products, we have stars, ventures, dogs, and cash cows. Now the axes came off of this diagram, unfortunately. Let me see if I can insert them very quickly. I'll do it sort of a rough and ready way here. But and the this would be the, let's see if I can do it this way. And I need to center that and probably make it bold enough so you can read it, and move it up just a little bit so that it's not in the way of everything else. There we go. Now this next one's a little more difficult. And I think what I'll do to avoid the difficulty is cheat. So let me just see if I can go this way and just call it market growth. And then I'll have to make this thing come across. There we are. And up at the top is fast growth. Down at the bottom here would be the slow growth. And I guess what I need to do is get this out of the way because, all right, so I'll put fast growth here. And then I'll copy this thing and call this slow growth. And market share, as it turns out, the way they've done this is and there we go. Okay, so now we're able to talk about the BCG matrix again. As the industry life cycle just gets started in the embryonic and early growth stages, we have ventures, right? We don't know, nobody really has a large share of the market yet because there isn't much of a market, and the risk is pretty high. But if you're successful, and as the industry begins to grow, suddenly here you are in the growth stage. And if you've done a good job, you've got a high share of a fast growth industry. And these are the businesses we love to have because not only are they growing, but they're generating profit because in order to grow, they have to be doing something in the way of attracting customers and usually at a favorable price cost relationship. And these companies don't generate much cash, but they do grow and generate the kind of earnings that publicly owned companies like to have. Now, the problem is that both the ventures require new cash and the stars require cash to keep them going. Their profit provides some of that cash, but they may need more cash. So what we'd like to have are businesses up here in the maturity stage that are no longer growing and no longer need new cash to keep them to fund their growth. So their profit becomes cash, free cash flow. So we'd like to have a business or more than one business with surplus cash flow. We would rather not have any businesses that don't have very good market shares and where they're not growing very much. Those are called dogs. But some of these ventures are going to become dogs because they're just not going to make it. Others are going to sit around in limbo for a while, and every once in a while we'll have a winner that becomes a star. But the dogs are certainly not what we're trying to generate here. What we would like to have is a balanced portfolio and let me see if I can just bring this together for you as well. So we would have, I think I'll put this guy here because that's a nice big one, and I'll just duplicate that one and say I'd like to have a cash cow that can throw cash up to those ventures. Now, what I've got to do is, oh boy, how about that? That sure went the wrong way, didn't it? Whoops. We'll get this right yet. All right, let's try this again. This has more promise. And what I'm trying to do is show that these are small guys and that we've got a few of them because they're not all going to make it. And the computer is absolutely arguing with me. And I may just have to say to you that you should, there's another one that they're doggone it. This computer's just got an attitude today, and I'm afraid it's going to win. Let's see what happens if we try to put it up here. And yeah, okay. What we'd like to have are several of these guys. I'll take one more shot. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's another one. And normally I would have 3 or 4 of these guys here, but again, the computer is just not the computer has decided it just does not like me. And when that happens, well, there, I can get one more. Okay. So one of these guys perhaps will become a star. One of them will just languish there, and another one will turn out to be a dog. But if all goes well, we can use the BCG matrix to assess our portfolio of businesses and products. And we may find that we've got a lot of cash cows or one big cash cow. We don't have much of a star and we don't have much of a venture. Frankly, in my travels, I've seen a lot of companies like that. These folks who run those companies are kind of lazy and don't realize that their prospects for the future aren't very good. Today, with low interest rates the way they are, we often find companies with lots of ventures and maybe only one little star and maybe only one little cash cow. So those companies are borrowing money from the banks, and that's not a good situation either. What we'd like to have is a balanced portfolio where we have cash flowing from the cash cows to the ventures. If we can do that, we are not as dependent on the banks as we otherwise would be. And then when they see if I can get lucky here and There we go. So what we want to do is send cash up to those guys so that we don't have to borrow as much from the bank. And that would be a very good strategic use of the BCG matrix. But in order to use this matrix, you first have to put all the businesses on the diagram. When you do, you'll get some information about just what kind of a situation you have, and whether you need to modify it or be pleased with it the way it is. I'm trying to tailor this thing, and that's probably not a very smart thing to do, but there you go. Okay, so that's the BCG matrix. It's extremely useful. Here's a wonderful model given to us by Michael Porter, and he called it the National Diamond. Story has it that Porter, who is a famous professor and specialist in business strategy and economics, a particular division of industrial organization economics. But apparently the Canadian government asked Porter to help him figure out how to build industries that they could have of their own that were not so dependent upon the U.S. Their southern neighbor was sort of calling the shots for economic negotiations and policy and so forth. And so the question to Porter was, can you give us anything to help us plan for the development of industries that will enable those industries to flourish? Porter's answer, again, this is all, I don't know what the right word is, but legend. I have no idea whether it's true or not. But as the legend goes, Porter's answer was, I have no idea how to answer you, but I'll study the question. So he studied it and ended up writing a book and giving us this model, and a whole lot of other things came from that research. But this model is basically intended to tell us the extent to which a country's economy supports a particular industry. For those of you who are in the international course, you really want to jot that down. Although I think I've also given you the same thing in this little box down below. But the models used to assess the support provided to an industry by the economy of a specific country or geographic region. Once you get your answer, if you get strong answers, then you can draw another conclusion, and that is that the industry has good growth potential in that country. Very often what will happen is that an industry will get started in a country and flourish because all these requirements are well met. And at that point, the industry can begin to move out from that country into regional and global growth. So very often, industries and companies in a particular industry will flourish in a country or a region, and it's sort of like a hothouse, you know. It's sort of like a development zone, industrial development zone. Once the industry gets going, it is comprised of companies that are strong and able to move into beyond that country and into the rest of the region or world and grow and uh, influence the terms of competition in that industry worldwide. So the four elements of the diamond, as you can see, are the factor conditions, and that's essentially the recipe for the products or services of the industry. In the old days, we used to talk about the materials, labor, and the structure, infrastructure or overhead. And today, of course, infrastructure would take you into highways. Technology is now part of factor conditions to a very great extent, and so forth. But what are the required components of this industry? Does the does the country offer them in abundance? Are they relatively available? Are they readily available? Demand conditions is almost self-explanatory. Do we find plenty of opportunity to produce this product or service so we can get lots of practice doing it? And in some parts of the world, there is greater demand for certain products than others. Back when Porter was doing this, another industry was attracted to this form of analysis, and that was the cell phone industry, because it was difficult to lay telephone cable between Scandinavian countries, but cell phones didn't need them, and so countries such as Sweden and Denmark and Norway and Finland took to cell phones pretty quickly. And the result was the growth of the cell phone industry up there before it took off in the rest of the world, because conditions were just right. Related and supporting industries, you can imagine computing software, hardware, and so forth. Lots of industries have need for other industries. And so when one industry really gets going in a country or a region, others will crop up around it to support it. And the result will be a cluster of related industries. And Porter wrote a lot about those clusters. And of course, they have a mutually reinforcing effect. Lots of chain reactions go on. A whole lot of learning formally and informally takes place. And all the members of the community of industries in a cluster learn from each other. And the result is that that country or that region grows economically, and those industries grow. Finally is the item at the bottom. Porter called it strategy, structure, and rivalry. And of course, Porter always explained himself really well. But the item that interests me the most is strategy. And you'll see why. There's a certain level of rivalry that occurs in industries that is most conducive to the growth of industries, and it's neither low nor high; it's moderate, and that's something that Porter didn't get into very much. Anyway, you can score various countries, as you see here, based upon Porter's diamond. And if you try this, the higher the score, the more a country is inclined to support that industry and with its economy. And so in this hypothetical example here, you can see that the US came out pretty well. Mexico and India didn't look as promising. So In this particular case, you might try going to China. You got pretty good support there too, don't you? So with that being the case, somebody who wanted to get an industry, get started with a new industry or grow in an industry, even if it already exists, would take a look at this scorecard. And by the way, if it found something where a factor where the level of support was low, then it might, for instance, with a related industry, it might even form its own subsidiary to take the place of a supporting firm, or it might try to join partnerships or joint ventures or some sort of alliance to encourage another company to come into the regions so that it would be possible to turn that 3 into a 4 or a 5. Once you get this information, then you can do a lot with it. Okay, this takes us then to another model from Porter that I'm sure you've heard of, and that's Porter's 5 forces. And Porter's 5 forces, very simply, is a device that enables us to estimate the profit potential of an industry. And the way it does that is by evaluating the strength of forces, 5 forces, in fact, that push profit down. And this is a very important point for you to understand. When we were talking about the diamond, the higher the score, the more likely the industry was to grow and prosper. We want a high score, but when we're talking about the 5 forces, the higher those forces are, the more pessimistic we are, the less likely the industry's occupants are to be profitable unless they can overcome these forces through their strategy. And what I have done here is actually copy slides. As a matter of fact, several of these slides were done by my students in various project teams. So here's one way simply to mention the 5 forces, and there they are. Rivalry. How intense is rivalry in this industry? And there are checklists that Porter gave us to measure all these things. What is the threat of new companies coming into this industry, which would upset the supply-demand balance? What's the threat of substitutes from brand new or altogether different industries? So we can travel long distances by air. In Europe, we can do it, and China, we can do it on high-speed rail. Don't have much of that in the US, but in other countries they do. But the real substitute these days is the internet, right? And Zoom and so forth. So there are real substitutes for each one of those industries. Supplier power, if suppliers have power, that is to say, there aren't as many of them as there are companies in your industry, then that pushes profit down. If there are very few large buyers, such as in the US auto industry and lots of auto component manufacturers, that again can give them the power to negotiate price and terms, and the result will be pressure, downward pressure on profit. So this is virtually a slide that one team put together, and as you can see, they concluded that there were some high forces pushing profit down. Here's another way to represent the same result with a bar chart. And in this particular case, the team studied the Mexican cement company, Cemex. This was several years ago when this analysis was done, but it really showed that there were some very strong forces working to push Cemex's profit margins down. And then we have the same kind of a scorecard that we saw with Porter's Diamond, only now if we have a high score, that's trouble. So here we are with US and China again with the highest score. And we've got Mexico with a low score. Certainly, if this is cement, I guess we can understand why. The same for Brazil. Now, I'm not sure this was CMEX, but in any event, the higher the score, the less the profit potential. So now let's talk about this item, rivalry. By the way, let's see, I guess we've talked about each one of these factors, so we can move on. But here's a discussion of, or a characterization of rivalry in these two different models from Porter. Now, in the five forces, Porter was very explicit. And I might add that I've done research with my students, and we've put industries along this graph here, and the intensity of rivalry corresponded to different levels of return on invested capital, depending upon how intense the rivalry was. And the relationship was pretty linear. If you have high rivalry, profitability probably not going to be very good. If you have low rivalry, you may have a monopoly, so your return on investment is probably pretty good. But the industry's, on the other hand, probably not going to grow very fast because the monopolist doesn't have a lot of incentives to raise the level of performance. So that takes us to the diamond. And if we want an industry to flourish and grow, we don't want rivalry to be low because then there's no motivation, no challenge to raise the state of the art. So as rivalry picks up, that challenge occurs and the state of the art rises. However, then if rivalry continues to intensify, what you get over here at the highest level of rivalry is dogs in the street fighting over a scrap of meat. I used to be a scuba diver, and I would go scuba diving with my son and guides, and the guides would take some chum fish, chopped up fish, and they'd put it down on the ocean floor and take off the lid from the bucket where the chum were in, and then get out of the way, because it wouldn't be long before sharks would come in there and just go crazy in a feeding frenzy, trying to get that chopped up fish. And it was a really good idea not to be anywhere near that feeding frenzy because those sharks went crazy. So if we've got rivalry over here at a very high level, that's not going to encourage firms to raise the state of their art, is it? Now, not as much empirical work has been done on this issue as there has been on this linear relationship. But this is my experience from consulting experience and working as a strategy consultant for about a little more than 4 decades. Okay, so in any event, you should be aware that if you're looking for an industry to grow and be healthy in a particular country, moderate rivalry is a good thing, and it gets a rating of 5, whereas rivalry at the extremes gets lower ratings. See, the rivalry 5 would maximize the downward impact on profitability in the 5 forces model. Okay, now a question is, how do you adjust? How do you estimate the threat of companies coming into an industry? And here's a way to do it. It's called the cage analysis. It was given to us by a colleague of Michael Porter. His name is Pankaj Ghemawat. And basically, he talked in terms of the distances between countries. So this is a scorecard done by a team, and you can see that there were no cultural or administrative differences between Mexico and Mexico, but apparently they thought that between regions of Mexico there could be geographic and economic distances. And in fact, Mexico cement does travel very badly. So if you can estimate the cultural differences between a reference country, the administrative difficulties of importing, exporting, doing international transactions. Usually we're talking about tariffs, duties, the kind of administrative complications that it takes to get products across borders. The geographic impact, I mentioned that cement doesn't travel very well. Very often, food products or perishable products or products that weigh a great deal and therefore cost a lot to transport, all of those impose high geographic distances. It's not just the number of miles between where you're located and where the customer might be located, but rather what the impact of that distance is. And then finally, economic factors. Some countries have the ability for people to make discretionary purchases because they have relatively high incomes. Other countries, not the same, right? In India, you've got clusters of population that have high spending power and much larger clusters of people that don't have very much spending power at all. So, and there are many countries, of course, that have just very low spending power nationwide, and others where discretionary spending power is pretty high. The US is probably in that category. So but you can see that it looks like this team didn't score the U.S. at its highest level. So there must have been other economic factors that influenced the attractiveness of the cement industry. In any event, once you've assessed these factors and you've computed a total, you can then draw a conclusion about how difficult it would be to get in to enter another industry. So here the barriers to entering Mexico from Mexico pretty low. Frankly, they should be a lot lower than that. On the other hand, the barriers to entering India from Mexico, this team correctly concluded would be very high. So back here in Porter's Five Forces for Mexico, threat of new entrants, since the threat, must be talking about another industry here. But the threat of new entrants would be low, and therefore the likelihood of new entrants coming into the industry would be very high. That would push profitability down. Okay, in any event, the correspondence between these two, these are not related analyses, so I probably shouldn't have tried to refer back to that one. A question will arise: how do you assess the cultural differences in Gimawatt's model? And by the way, all of this is really useful in an international analysis. But one way to do it is to use a framework given to us by a guy in Holland, I believe, Gert Hofstede. And Hofstede gave us this model, which basically was able to characterize the cultural differences between nations. And his work was so successful that it is carried on today by the Hofstede Institute. Hofstede's first four cultural dimensions were power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, and masculinity. And then later on, the long-term orientation was developed, and today you would find ratings for all countries, but I can attest to my work in China and Japan. The China and Japan have very high loadings on long-term orientation. As it turns out, China does not have, the Chinese culture does not have a high risk avoidance. They're willing to take risks or uncertainty avoidance. And it's a very unusual thing to find a country that is willing to take risk and still views its commercial or its business circumstances from a long-term point of view. Westerners have a very hard time dealing with that mix of cultural traits. And that's just one illustration of why it's so difficult sometimes to do business in different countries because we don't understand their cultures. In any event, let me just quickly define these criteria. Power distance is the extent to which folks at different status levels must keep their distance behaviorally, physically, and otherwise. So in a Latin country, a subordinate can't run right up to a boss or a boss's boss and just start a conversation about business or anything else. They'd be slapped down. It's just not done. On the other hand, if you're in Sweden or another Scandinavian country and a subordinate ran up to the boss or the boss's boss and said, "Hey, do you see that thing we did over there? There'd be no problem at all." The boss's boss probably say, "Huh, how about that? Show me." What do you? And they just get going. So the power distance is low in Scandinavian countries and it's high in Latin countries. Uncertainty avoidance is risk avoidance. Some countries are very, skeptical of taking risk without lots of planning. Since I was a planning consultant, that was just fine with me. On the other hand, if you're in China, then somebody's got an idea. They'd think about the long-term consequences, but they'd begin to make moves in that direction while they're thinking about the long-term. Individualism is actually part of a two-word term, individualism versus collectivism. So you can see that individualism is low in China. If we measured collectivism, it would be very high. So in Venezuela, boy, collectivism is the name of the game. But in the United States, we pride ourselves in being rugged individualists, as do the Australians. So they value the willingness of individuals to take initiative. Today in the United States, I don't think the U.S. would get the rating today that it got back in 1984 when Hofstede made this table. Masculinity and femininity are also two parts of a collective framework, and they have nothing to do with sex or gender. Masculinity is a metaphor for acquisitiveness and task orientation. Get it done. I don't care what it takes. Get it done. Give me that. I want that. I want that. I don't want to let you have it. I want it. That's masculine. Feminine is about keeping the organization intact, organizational integrity, keeping everybody together, feeling like they're part of the organization. Nobody's left out. That's femininity. So and by the way, I think there's a question and a quiz somewhere. So be aware that there's a big difference between what this word sounds like and what it really is. Masculinity is task avoidance and acquisitiveness. Femininity is organizational integrity. You know, think of Mama Bear and the cubs. If one of the cubs gets off too far, she goes out there and brings it back in to keep everybody together. And of course, long-term orientation is just what it sounds like. And if you take a look at the United States today, I suspect that we've got even a lower rating there, but China has a very high rating. These are real differences in the way countries' managers approach strategy and strategic planning. So again, it's really worth your being aware of it. These are just some graphs that were done by my students to show how differences occurred between countries and different ways of doing them. Here we're looking at all the countries and all the ratings. Here we're looking at all the countries and just one rating and another. You can see that Russia, in this case, was picked up as having low risk tolerance. Rather interesting. Masculinity versus femininity, long-term orientation. China was highest, but it was rather interesting that Germany and Russia also came in very high. And finally, Ansoff's growth strategy. Once we have gathered all this information, the question is, what are you going to do with it? And I've left off a couple designations here and or labels, and but they're discussed in this this little paragraph here. So let me come down here and assure you that the paragraph explains these things. This happens to be an analysis of the Schindler Elevator Company when it made a move from Switzerland to India. And at the time, this was Schindler's mix of products, I guess. And so we look at products, are they established or are they new? Are we going to come up with new products? Are the markets our existing products, or are we thinking about getting into new markets? And of course, this was Schindler's whole worldwide portfolio. The decision was to install elevators, to manufacture elevators and get them installed in India. This was the new move. After the case unfolded for a while, this was the way Schindler's portfolio or matrix of growth potentials. Ansoff's matrix is intended to explain how companies can grow. So it's really a growth strategy matrix. And so we call this cell where we're trying to sell more of our existing products in existing markets, market penetration. I'll see if I can sneak this in for you real quick. All right, market penetration. And I guess I should make that red so that it doesn't look like the text. Over here, we've got new products coming into established markets. And so that strategy, Porter called, um, let's see, product development. Okay. And I don't know if you've seen them or not, but in some very modern high-rise buildings, you no longer have to take an elevator that goes straight up and down. You can take them so it goes up, makes a left turn, goes up a while, makes a right turn, and they move around in the building. And that's Schindler's new port technology, but it's only meant for markets that have good technology. Anyway, if we're going to take our established products into new markets, you can almost guess what the name of that strategy was. It's market development. Okay. And then, and I want to make sure that I give this to you properly. Yeah, okay. Over here, a very, I don't know, complex strategy called product proliferation. And in this case, what we're trying to do is develop new products for new markets. And as you might imagine, that's a tough cookie. And your risk is very high, isn't it? Because you don't have knowledge about the product or the market the way you do in your existing, when you're dealing with your existing products or markets. However, if you can break through, for instance, the way that Apple did with the iPod, developing mobile music, a whole new product for a whole new market. This wasn't a market for desktop computers or cell phones, which came later, but it was a new product line for a new market. And of course, the rest is history. So great risk, right? Product proliferation entails great risk. Market penetration, you know your market, you know your product. There's not as great a risk. On the other hand, what's the potential reward, whoops, for increasing your market share a little bit? Well, you're going to get a reward, but what happens if you develop an iPod? Well, then you get a great reward. So there's a relationship between risk and reward, right? Up here with market penetration, low risk, low reward. With product proliferation, high risk, high reward. And product development and market development, probably about the same, moderate risk, moderate reward, or pretty much so. Now, this video is getting to be pretty long, so I want to bring it to a close, but I do want to at least acquaint you with the fact that another thing we like to do is assess the risk that a country presents to us when we are trying to move into it. We've done our analysis with Ansough's matrix, and we see that we think we want to try product proliferation in a new country. On the other hand, if we take a look at the politics, the government, the regulation, economic trends, and so forth, we may have second thoughts. The most important point that I'd like to mention to you, that there are several approaches to assessing country risk. And frankly, if I have time to redo this PowerPoint file, I'm going to put some other approaches to country risk in here. Again, I mentioned that I've actually used my students' slides here, and they took the approach that the ones I'm going to show you in a minute. of assessing the economic forces that inject risk into a country. That's a perfectly legitimate way to do it. But there certainly are other ways, for instance, to rate the favorability of countries' political situation, its stability, because that affects long-term, the long-term outlook, doesn't it? If the country isn't stable, it may offer good opportunities today, but you just can't be sure that those same opportunities will exist 10 years from now, and so forth. In any event, be aware, please, that there are multiple ways to assess country risk. Here's how this team did it, and you can see, and I'm going to let you read these slides. I'm not going to, but you can get the picture here that when this team, and you can look at the years and see this was done several years ago. But at the time it was done, Brazil wasn't looking too good. Frankly, it's not looking very good today. On the other hand, China was looking very good, and it's looking good today. But in any event, this is an approach to taking a look at a country's economic profile and then drawing conclusions regarding strengths and weaknesses with regard to opportunities to enter into that country with your business. So this has been a long video, hasn't it? But I think that if you're in the international course, it'll help you to take a look at how your business is positioned in the international market and how various countries either are favorable or unfavorable as locations for your company. If you're in my strategic management course, you probably will be applying just about every one of these models as you go through the project analysis that is required in, or the project that is required in the traditional course. If you're looking at this in the non-traditional course, then this is a set of tools that you can take with you into your employment with a company that has international business. I do wish that we had 16 weeks so that you could practice these devices. But that becomes a little difficult when we have these great big online courses with 30 plus students in them and only 7 weeks. So, but I did want to give you this toolkit of analytic models so that if you have a need, especially for considering strategic alternatives in international markets, you will have some tools to use in that work. And so with that, I'm going to try to get out of this video just as fast as I can. And I want to thank you if you if you stayed watching the whole thing. If you stopped and hit the pause button halfway through, you're a lot smarter than the rest of us, because there are a whole bunch of us that just can't wait to turn this off and go to the bathroom. So I'm going to turn it off right now. Goodbye.